Right, so the Stormlight archive, I've finished it. And by I've finished it, I mean I'm up to date with it. And I've done a video on every book in the Stormlight archive series, including novellas. So if you want to go and have a look, if you want to go and watch my videos on the individual books in the series before watching my ranking video, I'm going to try and keep this one spoiler free so that so this is going to be the video that you can watch if you haven't read the Stormlight archive but you're interested and you want to know where each one is. But also if you have read the Stormlight archive, wait until the end of the video. Don't skip to the end because I need audience retention, but wait till the end of the video and then get in the comments and let me know your ranking of the Stormlight archive, where you would put each book. But yeah, this is basically just going to be my ranking. I usually, when I have done this for book series that I've finished in the past, I do them in my review of the last book of that series, or in my ramble session of my last book in that series. Stormlight is something that has taken me a whole year to get through, pretty much a whole year to get through, and I have a lot to say about each individual book even now. So I thought I would just devote its own video to the ranking, because it's just gonna, if I tacked this on at the end of what is already a 40-minute video that I did for Wind and Truth, that video would have been an hour and a half long. This video might stretch to an hour long anyways. I will try not to be here for too long. But without further ado, to speed up the process a bit, I'm going to talk about, we're going to find out what is my least favourite Stormlight archive book. And I think I'll just get them out of the way. The two novellas. I think it's unfair to compare a novella to a main book in a series, because one, you're comparing that to that. Two, neither of these books contain or have focus on the main characters in the series. They're usually like an offshoot from an interlude that happens in one of the main books. So what is actually my least favourite book, Dawn Shard, is about Risen, who is a kind of paraplegic merchant woman who works for the Coalition, that has kind of been tasked to go to this island and find out what's going on there, and then hijinks ensues, and it's essentially, this is a road trip book, but on a boat, and you know, it serves a purpose to kind of entice you into a bit more of the lore of the wider world of Roshar that you wouldn't get, that the main books don't have enough time for, or are already long enough that they don't have the time to devote extra pages to, let's go to an island and find out what the Dawn Shards are, or find out what this is. This is important when you get to Wind and Truth, but I think reading it at the time, and especially now, and comparing it to not only the amount of content that you get in the other books comparative to how much you're paying, but also just how I felt while reading this, which was, this is a slow book for like just over 200 pages. This felt like just the same thing going on over and over and over again. It also doesn't help that this book has a focus on Lopen, who is one of my least favourite characters in the entire series. But anyway, Dawnshard, there you go. That's my least favourite book in the series. And then we have Edge Dancer, which is basically Lift's book. And we still don't really have the payoff to this. This and several interludes and several chapters in the main series have kind of teased that Lift is such a big, important character and is going to have, and is going to be big and important in the future of the series. And I'm excited to get the payoff of that. I feel like this is something that's going to feel, this is something that's going to work out a lot better, and is going to feel more, you're going to feel more justified reading this later on in the series when Lift has more to do. At the moment, Lift hasn't had that much to do, so getting this book feels more like and I guess that's what a novella is. It is basically a side quest, and I didn't dislike this. I just think, and this goes by a lot quicker than Dawnshard, despite being thicker. Only slightly, but it is thicker. This does go by quicker. And Lift is still a compelling character, and she is kind of a main character in this series as well. So, but that's post this book. You do also have the thing of the first 60 pages of this essentially just being one of the interludes from Words of Radiance. So that's a good quarter of this book that you've already read. Moving on to the main series now, that's the novellas out of the way. What is my least favourite book in the main series? And I think, unfortunately, and I do want to preface this, even going back to the novellas as well, there is not a bad book in the Stormlight archive. I will say that. However, not every book is going to be a 10 out of 10. And what I think is closer to a 7 or an 8... is Rhythm of War. When I did I think I was a lot more positive on Rhythm of War when I talked about it in my video, in the video about it, because that was straight after reading it. I think looking back now, I don't necessarily feel the same way. Yes, the ending, and I think this does have one of the most, not necessarily like action-packed or like balls to the wall conclusions that the Stormlight Archive has had. But this does have one of the more gut-wrenching and emotionally charged endings the Stormlight Archive has had. And I do think that this one has what I think is my favourite Sanderlanche in it. And every time I say Sanderlanche, I cringe a little bit because it does sound a little bit like, oh, you've become infatuated with this author now. You're coining terms. But there's no better way to say it. Sanderson is really good at writing a climax, and the climax of this book is really, really good. And it did make me almost tear up. Getting to that point, and I feel like this is going to be something that either makes you stick or leave the series. Getting to the end of this book, feels like not a slog, but it feels more like you're having to trust the process, and like you're having to trust that, right, we've got to get through these moments to get to something cool that's going to happen towards the end. You know, cool things are coming, they're just not here yet. That's what I felt like with this book, more so than any other book in the series, even Wind and Truth, which I feel like is the one that most people would cite to having that problem. This, for me, just felt... And also, this book does focus more on Venli, who is a character that I didn't really find myself caring about. Also focuses a lot on Navani Colin, who is a character that I also found a little bit... that I also found like I didn't really care about that much. I just wanted to get back to Kaladin. I wanted to get back to Dalinar and finding out what they're doing. And this was kind of the first book where this and Oathbringer, but Oathbringer does focus on a character that does focus on my favourite character. So guess where that book's going. But this and Oathbringer were kind of my first times reading it where I was like, Kaladin's not the main character anymore. Kaladin just isn't the main character of the Stormlight Archive anymore. And I felt a bit sad about that, because I liked learning about Kaladin, and I liked following his journey. And I feel like when he's not on the page, the book is a little bit weaker for it. Not hugely, because the supporting characters in this series, and pretty much all of the characters in this series, have something to latch onto. It's just the ones in this book I didn't feel that much of a connection to until the end. Navani's a character that I only like. I don't love that character like I do Kaladin, Dalinar, Adolin. The next book I want to talk about, and the one that I've talked about most recently, and the one that I finished most recently, Wind and Truth. I like this a lot more than it sounds like other people do. And maybe that's because I read each book back to back to back. Maybe it's because I didn't have the weight. Maybe it's because I didn't have that like hype and expectation. Maybe because I went into this with the expectation of, a lot of people say that this is the weak point in the series. This is their least favourite, or this one's a little bit disappointing. And then I went into it and I was like, this is just another Stormlight Archive book. It's one that's kind of the same kind of... I had the same kind of vibe with this as Rhythm of War, if only because I feel like this book doesn't feel as much like a slog, like you're waiting to get to the end for cool things to happen. Cool things do happen throughout the book. It's just the coolest stuff is at the end, and I feel like that is the way to do a book, maybe. That's the way to do anything, really, is to save your biggest punches for the end. It does, the only thing to me is, like, I don't like when a book ends, or when, like... So, I treat this as, like, the end, or this is kind of being treated as the end of season 1 of the Stormlight Archive, right? Even though, if this does ever get an adaptation into a TV show, season 1 is The Way of Kings. This is being like treated as the end of arc 1. And I hate, one of my biggest pet peeves is when say in comic books, in TV, in any kind of media, something ends with the heroes are on the back foot, everything's gone to shit, basically, and your main character / favourite character has died, or it looks like they've died. No, that's not what this is at all. This is the mid-season finale. So if you remember back when TV shows had 20 episodes, this is your episode 10. So this is that moment where you're like, everything's gone to shit. How are we even going to be able to get out of this? You've got to wait a year for the next for the next installment. Or in terms of this is the wait is a bit more modern TV standards, where you've got to wait 5 or 6 years for the next arc or the next season or whatever. That's just my biggest pet peeve. I would rather have ended the arc in more of a hopeful place, and we kind of do, but also Dalinar Colin's dead. I know I said I wasn't going to do any spoilers, but that's not a spoiler at this point. That's my only real critique. That, and like the overabundance of action. If there's too many action scenes back to back to back, you kind of get numb to it. And I did kind of get that. I did kind of get that here a little bit. Next book I'm going to talk about, and this is my third favourite book in the series, Words of Radiance. I really liked this. This book is predominantly about Shallan, who is a character that I think at the end of this book I didn't like. Throughout the first 2 books in the series, I didn't like Shallan. At the end of Wind and Truth, I do, but it took 5 books for me to like Shallan. I think this book, the point of this book was to get me to like Shallan, and it failed in that perspective. That being said, again, this has one of my favourite conclusions in the Stormlight archive. This is kind of where we start seeing characters come together, and characters start like interacting with each other more. Like, Dalinar has just met Kaladin at the end of Way of Kings, so their relationship is starting to form. Adolin and Kaladin have this kind of rivalry at the start of this book, and that develops into a friendship after like a big, really cool action sequence. Like I said, Shallan kind of joins the party in this book, and we get a lot of her flashbacks as well. So yeah, and obviously the big conclusion is the kind of epic confrontation between Kaladin and Sazeth, and those characters kind of coming together. And I think at that point in this series, that was like, this is the coolest shit I've ever read. And I was kind of like just turning pages, wanting to get through the conclusion of this book, which is really, really cool. However, it's just, I didn't find myself caring about Shallan the way that the book kind of wanted me to. Now we've gotten to a point where Shallan has had her arc and she's overcome her demons. Like, yeah, that's a character that I like now. Anyway, my second favourite book in the Stormlight archive, and the first book in the Stormlight archive, The Way of Kings. there are moments in this book that still live rent-free in my head. The conclusion, the start, the tragedy of Kaladin Stormblessed, the story of Dalinar Kholin, just being introduced to all of these characters, the world that's being set up. I think a lot of fantasy things in general tend to take a dip after their introduction, or after the world building is set up, because after you've set up the world, you're kind of relying on those characters to keep the engagement there, and I think that's where Brandon Sanderson does a really good job in just sticking with, in just having characters that you want to really root for and care about. And that's where this book kind of is the best introduction to a big series. And also, very thick book, got through it in about a month and a half. So, I know that's kind of chump change for a lot of people. But for me, I was pretty excited about that. And the twist at the end about Taravangian being a bad guy, that actually made my jaw drop. I was not expecting that at the end. It doesn't have the biggest climax. I don't think it needed the biggest climax. This essentially is basically just your Fellowship of the Ring. Just building up characters. I feel like this is the funniest book in the Stormlight archive, despite a lot of the subject matter and the actual material in it being quite dark. You have characters you have themes of depression. You have characters, debating suicide, but in that there is kind of a very human sense of humor that permeates through the book, and I feel like the humor in this is kind of lost when we get to Words of Radiance, Wind and Truth, where it does feel more, it feels more like an MCU thing where each character has to be super quippy and super on it all the time, to the point where even Dalinar is making quips, and I don't love that as much, but in this, I feel like that was used a lot more sparingly, so when we did get a moment that was supposed to be funny, it did land, more so than it does in, Rhythm of War, Wind and Truth. But now we're going to go to my favourite book in the series, which is Oathbringer. Oathbringer is just the most badass book in the series. Getting into the tragedy of Dalinar Kholin, getting to really understand that character and feel more for him than we have in the two books prior, whilst also starting to see the downfall of Shallan and her going into more of like a her kind of other personality starting to come to the fore, and the conclusion of this book, the climax of this book, basically leading to your Avengers moment, where the kind of all of the main characters of the series all kind of come together. Really cool. And obviously that moment of Dalinar being like, "You can't have my pain," still lives rent free in my head. So cool. So good. This has the best moments in the series, in my opinion. Just one of the coolest books I think I've read. And it was when I truly kind of snapped and was like, I really like the Stormlight Archive. I just love these characters and this world. And unfortunately, the two books after it kind of take a bit of a nosedive in tone and kind of quality. But I don't think like I said, I don't think any book in this series, even the two novellas, I don't think anything is bad. I just think maybe the last two books in the series have kind of, tried to be a bit too close to the MCU-ish for me. To the point of, like, how stuff is described, dialogue, Adolin doing a freaking superhero landing, and the Spren armor looking basically like an Iron Man suit. I don't love that. What I will say to end this is, I love this series. I wouldn't have spent a whole year devoting my time to this series if I didn't really love it. And I do. And I'm really glad that I found the Stormlight Archive, because I don't think I would have started getting into reading again in general without hearing Jacksepticeye talk about it, but also going out and getting The Way of Kings myself. I really love these books. I love these characters. I love this world. And yeah, maybe the last two books haven't been up to the same standard of the previous three, where you've got kind of three books that are all 9 to 10. And then you've got two following books that are more of like a 7 or 8. I know I was doing that, but I didn't go 6, 7. Shut up, bitch. But anyway, I'm really excited to see where this series goes. I'm really excited to see what happens after the time skip. I'm really excited for Ghostbloods. I have no idea what that's going to be. I'm excited to get into Mistborn Era 2. I've got what is it? It should be behind me. It's not behind me. But I've got the Eisenhorn trilogy on the go at the moment. That should be done sometime mid-February. I should be done with that sometime mid-February. I do have the first 18 volumes of One Piece that I'm going to be getting into at some point this year. And obviously there's always going to be comic book stuff to talk about as well. So, yeah, my plans going forward are vast, varied, and, big. And there's always streams going on over on Twitch as well. If you're not already following my Twitch, that's down in the link downstairs. I will see you guys in the next video. Like I said, let me know in the comments below what your ranking of the Stormlight Archive is. Let me know where you put Wind and Truth. Whether you're like me and you think it's a little bit weaker than the rest of the series, or if you have it right at the bottom, or if you have it more floating towards the top, because I think it's one of those ones where it really depends on the reader. If you're like me and you don't mind the kind of quippy dialogue of the MCU, you might like it a bit more. If you really don't like that, you might like it a bit less. I haven't seen many people more on the spectrum of really liking it. I've seen more people on the spectrum of this is a bit weaker of an offering from the Stormlight Archive, and I kind of fall into that camp as well. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you enjoyed. Peace.